what should I invest my money in if I want to become wealthy? And I say to them, what stage of your life are you at? For example, if somebody's 20 years old and they just inherited $50,000, they might say, oh, I'd like to invest in the stock market and I'm going to become a millionaire by investing in the stock market. And I tell that person that there's an order of investing. And this is the order. First, you must invest in yourself. You will get the highest return on investing in yourself first. Imagine a carpenter, a skilled carpenter, who doesn't have a job and he doesn't have any tools. If that skilled carpenter borrowed $5,000 from the bank and purchased tools, a van, and spent money advertising, he would go from having zero income to having $60,000 a year income within a relatively short period of time. So what would the return on investment of that $5,000 loan from the bank be? It would be several thousand percent. It would be 5,000 times 12. So now imagine a different scenario. Imagine that person lends somebody $5,000 at 8% interest. Well, $5,000 at 8% interest means that you would gain $400 per year back on your investment. And there's inflation in that too, and inflation is, let's say, 5%. So the return on your investment for lending $5,000 to somebody would be $200 a year. Compare that to the carpenter who takes that $5,000 and invests in himself and goes from no income to $60,000 a year income. So now you have to look at yourself and you have to say, the first investment and the best investment is in me and my job skills. So whether it's getting job training, learning a trade, learning a skill that then you can take and open your own business, that would really be the key to success. School, if it's attached to a license, is good. If it's not attached to a license, I think it's an overpriced commodity. So either way, you're investing in yourself. After you invest in yourself, then your next stage is to invest in your own business. So you take those job skills, and you take job skills I prefer in a service business, because a service business you can open up and be successful with a small amount of capital, and larger businesses can compete with you. Now, why can't larger businesses compete with you? Let's take a contractor and compare him to Sears Home Improvement. If my cousin is a painter, my cousin can come over and paint this room for a couple of $100. He doesn't have any advertising. All he has to do is buy the paints and the brushes. Sears Home Improvement has to pay for this whole bureaucracy, millions of dollars of advertising, all which has to go into the product. So Sears Home Improvement cannot come and paint this room any cheaper than my cousin can. On top of that, if my cousin is a conscientious person and a good worker, he will be more caring and he will be more in control of the project than a big bureaucracy. So when you go into a service business, big companies can't compete with you. There is a point of no return with a service business where it becomes out of control. For example, if I am managing a project, I can hire 5 people perhaps underneath me that I can manage effectively. But if I try and run 5 different construction projects at the same time, I will lose control over those projects. The employees will not work as hard. they will not be accountable, and each project has a smaller and smaller return on it. For example, the first project, as we were discussing before, if I'm a solo carpenter, I go from 0 to making $60,000 just by doing my own work. When I have to hire somebody, I have to supervise their work, I have to train their work, so the return on my effort is smaller than 100%, because it's not like this person can just come in and do 100% of the job. This person comes in and does the job. They don't do it as well as the owner. They have to be trained, they have to be supervised, then there has to be a payroll, then there has to be an accountant, then there has to be payroll taxes, all that are going to go into the cost of it. Now, if I have to set up a second crew, I have to set up a second crew, and not only do we have the workers in the second crew, but we have to have a manager in that second crew, a highly paid manager. So now the return on investment of the second crew is smaller than the return on the first crew, because the first crew, I'm making the manager's salary, and I might be working in it too, and making a worker's salary, where in the second crew, I have to pay the manager, I have to pay the workers, and if it's not their money involved, they might not be, they probably won't be as efficient as the crew of the owner. On top of that, as I said, we have more accounting, we have more administrative, more bureaucratic expenses. Now, if I do 5 crews, now I can't work in my crew, so I have to have, my full-time job is now managing the 5 crews and speculating whether I'm running them properly. Now, I can't run 100 crews because the management effort to run the 100 crews, now I turn into Sears Home Improvement, and I can't run the job better than the one employee. And this model is completely different than something like a car manufacturer, where I can't make a car better than General Motors because you need hundreds of millions of dollars of heavy equipment and advertising to create and market a car. So that's an economy of scale that's outside of the ordinary person's financial ability, and to the optimal size for an automobile company is very large, where the optimal size for a service industry is very small. As I said, I used the comparison where my cousin can paint this room quicker and with less overhead than if I have to pay the whole bureaucracy at Sears Home Improvement. Now, the only place where the bigger company has an advantage is with the advertising. And yes, advertising is an economy of scale. By economy of scale, I mean the bigger it is, the less cost per unit and the more efficiency it is, right? So if you're trying to create a brand is an economy of scale. So now the person goes from their own job skills, as I was saying before, to opening their own business. And that's where they get their highest return. And you get your highest return on your first crew, and then as you start investing outside of yourself, the return on investment gets smaller and smaller. You don't make as much money on your second crew, paying for the second van and the second tools, as you made on your first. Now, if there's a good margin in the project and you are an educated manager, then you can make money on a second crew and maybe a third crew, but each additional crew you'll make a smaller and smaller amount of money until you get to the point where you're actually losing money. Which then, so after you invest in yourself, your own business, your own crew, the further the money gets away from you, the smaller the investment. By the time the money gets into something like a public market, like a stock market or a bond market, it's somebody else's ball game. In the stock market, even if you're lucky, maybe you're making 10% a year. So unless you have tremendous amounts of extra cash that you have absolutely nothing to do with, you're not going to put it in the stock market or the bond market or get a 1% return on your investment putting the money in a bank. It might be safe in a bank, but you're not going to get a return on investment. Actually, you're going to lose money because of inflation. So the order of investment is yourself first, your first crew in your service business, then crews that you can manage which are close to you, and then after that, when you have nothing else to do, then you can think about putting it in your own home where you're speculating on real estate or in the stock market or the bond market. Thank you and happy investing.